The day I died, the sky was the color of a fresh bruise. I remember the way the light slanted through the stained glass windows of Silverwood Academy's East Corridor, casting jewel-toned shadows across the marble floor. I remember the sound of my classmates' footsteps echoing behind me, a predator's rhythm, closing in. I remember Nelson's hand on my shoulder. Nelson, who had been my best friend since kindergarten, who had taught me to skip stones and climb trees, and who had promised, when we were both 7 years old, that he would always protect me. Nelson was the one who pushed me. "I'm sorry, Iris," he said, and his voice cracked on my name, but Melody was the best of us. She deserved a memorial. You took that from her. You took everything from her. I didn't scream. There was no time. I felt his hand slam into my shoulder blades, and then I was falling. 8 flights of stairs, my body bouncing against the stone steps like a rag doll, my skull cracking against the marble floor at the bottom. The last thing I saw was my classmates' faces, lined up along the railing above me. Their expressions not horrified, but satisfied. They had avenged their beloved Melody. They had done justice. My blood pooled beneath me, warm and spreading. And then there was nothing. The police ruled it an accident. Tragic fall, the report said. No witnesses. But there were witnesses, 37 of them. Every single member of my graduating class had seen Nelson push me. Every single one of them had lied to the police, their stories identical and rehearsed. Asterisk, she tripped. She felt we didn't see anything. IT happened so fast. Asterisk. They lied for Nelson. They lied for Melody. They lied because I had been the one to say no to the graduation photograph, the one to call the curse real, the one to survive when Melody did not. And in the logic of grief-stricken teenagers, my survival was an insult that could only be answered with blood. My parents did not survive my death, and my father, a gentleman who had worked double shifts at a factory to pay for my Silverwood tuition, stopped eating, and my mother stopped speaking. 3 months after the funeral, they locked themselves in their bedroom with a charcoal brazier, clutching my Ivy League acceptance letter in their hands. The note they left behind was 7 words: "In the next life, we will give you everything." I died on October 1/7th, and my parents died on January 22nd. And on February 3rd, I opened my eyes to the familiar ceiling of my bedroom, sunlight streaming through the lace curtains my grandmother had sewn, the smell of my mother's coffee drifting up from the kitchen below. I was 17 years old. The date was September 1st, 6 weeks before the graduation photograph, 8 weeks before Melody's flight to Europe, 10 weeks before my death. And somewhere in the halls of Silverwood Academy, the girl whose ghost would destroy my family was still alive. Not for long. System initializing. Host detected. Iris Vance status. Deceased cause. Homicide by blunt force trauma, followed by systemic cover-up and judicial failure. Secondary casualties. Parents, suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning. Compatibility, 99.9%. Activating karmic rebirth protocol. You have been wronged beyond mortal measure. You are granted one chance to return. Use it to expose what was hidden. Use it to balance the scales. Initiating temporal rewind. 8 weeks. Skill unlocked. Curse perception. You can now perceive the supernatural forces that exist within Silverwood Academy. The curse is real. You were right all along. And you are no longer defenseless against it. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding, my hands trembling. The sunlight was warm on my face, but I felt cold, the kind of cold that comes from knowing exactly what is going to happen and exactly how little time you have to stop it. Melody Whitmore, the most popular girl at Silverwood Academy. The girl whose smile could charm teachers into changing grades, whose tears could convince any boy to do anything she asked, whose tragic death would become the excuse for my murder. She was still alive, and I had 8 weeks to make sure that when she died this time, she wouldn't take me with her. The system pulsed at the edge of my consciousness, a quiet hum of power. Curse perception activated. Scanning Silverwood Academy for supernatural signatures. Asterisk, asterisk. Signature detected. The graduation photograph curse. Origin, 1923. A student named Eleanor Vance, your great-grandmother, the system notes with something like surprise, was expelled from Silverwood Academy after she accused a teacher of assault. The accusation was buried. The teacher was promoted. Eleanor was institutionalized and died in an asylum 3 years later. Before she died, she placed a curse on the Academy's most sacred tradition, the graduation photograph. Any student whose image is captured in the Silverwood graduation photograph will suffer a death of equal injustice to Eleanor's own. The curse has been active for 100 years. 17 students have died since its creation. Every death was ruled an accident or a tragedy. None were ever connected. My blood ran cold. The curse was real that I had been right to refuse the photograph. And Melody Melody, who had insisted on the photo against my warnings, who had charmed the entire class into agreeing with her, had paid the price for her disbelief. Her plane had fallen into the Atlantic because a ghost from 1923 had claimed her as payment for a century-old crime. But that wasn't the worst part. The system continued its scan, and the secrets of Silverwood Academy began to pour out, one after another, each revelation more damning than the last. The first secret came 3 seconds later. Melody Whitmore was not just a victim of the curse. She was a knowing participant in a separate curse, a ritual of popularity and control that her grandmother, the head of the Silverwood Board of Trustees, had been performing for decades. The Whitmore women had maintained their social dominance at Silverwood by offering up a classmate each generation to the same dark force that had claimed Eleanor Vance. ***, evidence file number 0001 created. The second secret came 12 seconds after that. Nelson, my childhood best friend who had eventually pushed me down the stairs, had been in love with Melody since freshman year. He had been writing her love letters for 3 years, letters that she had been reading aloud to her friends in the locker room, mocking his awkward prose and his desperate devotion. He knew. He had heard her laughing, and he still loved her. He would do anything for her. ***, evidence file number 0002 created. The third secret came 40 seconds later. The entire faculty of Silverwood Academy knew about the curse. They had known for generations. The rule against graduation photographs was not a superstition. It was a safety measure instituted by a headmaster in 1925 who had watched 3 students die in as many years and had desperately tried to protect the rest. But the current administration, led by Headmistress Chen, had been systematically dismantling the old rules. They called them archaic. They called them anti-progress. They were erasing the protections because acknowledging the curse would mean acknowledging the crimes that created it. ***, evidence file number 0003 through number 0007 created. And then the fourth secret came, the one that would unravel everything. The Silverwood Board of Trustees, including Melody's grandmother, had been using the curse to eliminate undesirable students for decades. The students who died were never random. They were scholarship students, diversity admits, children of faculty rivals, anyone whose presence threatened the Whitmore family's control over the academy. The photograph was a weapon, and the Whitmores had been aiming it for a century. ***, evidence file number 0008 through number 0047 created. I sat in my childhood bedroom, the morning sun warm on my face, and I watched the evidence accumulate. 47 files, then 100, then 200, every few dozen seconds, a new secret. Every minute, another layer of rot exposed. The conspiracy was not just Melody. The IT was not just Nelson. It was an entire institution, built on a foundation of murder and silence, and I was the first person in 100 years who could prove it. The morning light filled the classroom, dust motes dancing in the golden rays slanting through the tall windows. Melody Whitmore leaned against my desk, her smile as perfect and delicate as porcelain. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders. Her eyes sparkled with a particular warmth that made everyone, teachers, students, parents, fall helplessly in love with her. Iris, let's take a graduation photo together. Just this once. The class murmured in agreement. ***, it's just a silly superstition. Don't be so dramatic. Melody's leaving for Europe in a few weeks. This is the last chance we'll have. ***. In my previous life, I had said no. I had felt the cold weight of dread pressing against my chest, the primal certainty that something terrible would happen if that photograph was taken. I had refused, and I had gone to the head teacher, and I had stopped the photograph from being taken. And when Melody's plane fell into the Atlantic, when her body was never recovered, when the class had no photograph to remember her by, they blamed me. They blamed me for their grief. They blamed me for their guilt. And Nelson, sweet, devoted Nelson, had pushed me down 8 flights of stairs to make it right. I looked at Melody's beautiful face, and I saw what I hadn't seen before. The calculation behind her smile, the coldness behind her warmth. She knew about the curse. She had always known. Her insistence on the photograph was not naivety. It was strategy. She believed the curse would take someone else, someone the Whitmore family had marked for elimination. A scholarship student from a poor family, a girl whose parents had no power to demand answers. She believed the curse would take me. Iris. Melody tilted her head, her porcelain smile flickering with the faintest edge of impatience. What do you say? I slowly pulled my hand back from the edge of her grip and let my expression settle into something unreadable. Sure. Why not? The class erupted in cheers. Melody clapped her hands together, her smile radiant. I knew you'd come around. This is going to be perfect. I smiled back at her, and in my smile was the memory of my parents' faces, the cold marble of the morgue. the weight of my blood pooling beneath me. The 7 words they left behind. In the next life, we will give you everything. There would be no next life. There would be only this one. And in this life, I was going to make sure that every single person who had destroyed my family paid the full price for what they had done. The photograph was scheduled for the following week. 7 days. That was how long I had to prepare. I spent those 7 days in a blur of activity. The system continued to document, its evidence files growing by the hour. The curse was real, and I had 7 days to master it before it mastered me. I began with research, and my great-grandmother, Eleanor Vance, had not simply placed a curse on the graduation photograph. She had woven a complex supernatural binding, a ritual that linked the Academy's fate to the justice it had denied her. The curse was not mindless. IT had rules. IT could be aimed. And if I could understand it, I could control it. By the 3rd day, I had discovered that the curse required 3 things: a photograph, a sacrifice, and a witness who remembered the original crime. The photograph was the trigger. The sacrifice was the payment, and the witness, the descendant of the wronged, was the one who chose where the curse would land. I was that witness. Eleanor Vance's blood ran in my veins. By the 5th day, I had uncovered the full extent of the Whitmore family's crimes. Melody's grandmother, Celeste Whitmore, had been using the curse for 40 years to eliminate threats to the family's power. She had a list, a handwritten ledger, hidden in her office at the Academy, of every student she had marked for Death Point 17 names, each one crossed out in red ink. The 18th name, written in fresh black ink, was my own. By the 7th day, the day of the photograph, I had amassed 612 pieces of evidence, and I was ready. The graduation photograph was taken on the front steps of Silverwood Academy in the golden light of a September afternoon. The entire senior class assembled in neat rows, their smiles bright, their futures bright, their faith in Melody Whitmore's invincibility absolute. The photographer, a nervous man hired by the Academy for the occasion, adjusted his lens and began the countdown. 3, 2, 1, smile. The shutter clicked, the flash exploded, and for a single, suspended moment, I felt the curse activate. It was not a metaphor. IT was not a superstition. IT was a physical force, a cold wave of malevolence that rippled outward from the photograph, invisible to everyone but me. The system flared in my peripheral vision, its interface blazing with supernatural energy. Asterisk, asterisk, curse activated. Target, default, all photograph subjects, override. Witness priority enabled. And then I spoke. Not me, I said, my voice ringing across the silent courtyard. The cold wave of the curse paused, shuddered, and bent away from me, seeking the path of least resistance. And not the innocent. I didn't come back to kill them. I turned to face the Whitmore family, Melody, her grandmother Celeste, her father Harold, all of them frozen in the courtyard with the rest of the class. I came back for justice. What are you talking about? Melody's porcelain smile had finally cracked. Iris, you're scaring everyone. What are you doing? I'm not doing anything, I said. Your great-grandmother did something. My great-grandmother answered. And now the bill is due. I raised my hand. The evidence I had gathered, all 612 files, materialized in the air around me, a constellation of documents and photographs and recorded confessions. Let me tell you a story about Silverwood Academy, about Eleanor Vance, who was institutionalized and died for telling the truth. About the 17 students murdered by a curse her killers turned into a weapon, and about the Whitmore family, who have been sacrificing their classmates for 100 years. Celeste Whitmore stepped forward, her face white as bone. This is absurd. This is slander. Security. Security can't help you. Neither can your lawyers. Neither can your money. I opened my hand, and the full weight of the curse, 100 years of accumulated supernatural fury, gathered in my palm like a storm. I am the descendant of Eleanor Vance. I am the witness. And I am the one who decides where this curse lands. I released the curse that IT did not strike the class, that IT did not strike the innocent. IT struck the Whitmore family, Celeste, Harold, and their co-conspirators on the board of trustees. And it struck Melody, who had known about the curse, who had aimed it at her classmates, who had smiled at me across the classroom while planning my death. The Whitmores collapsed, not dead. The curse did not kill indiscriminately, but marked, bound, exposed. Every crime they had committed was written on their skin in Eleanor Vance's handwriting, a century's worth of murder scrolling across their faces like a film reel. The students screamed. The teachers fled. The photographer kept taking pictures, his flash illuminating the scene in bursts of white light. When it was over, the Whitmore family lay on the steps of Silverwood Academy, their crimes visible to the world. The evidence I had gathered, the photographs, the documents, the confessions, had already been sent to the Department of Justice, the New York Times, and every major news network in the country. I walked down the steps and into the September sunshine. Behind me, the sirens were already approaching. Ahead of me was a future that I had earned with blood and grief, and the refusal to stay dead. Third-party objective commentary by Dr. Helena Mirren, folklorist and author of American Schoolyard Curses, A Century of Supernatural Violence in Elite Institutions. What distinguishes the Silverwood case is the extraordinary duality of the protagonist's position. Iris Vance is simultaneously a victim of the curse and its master, a descendant of the woman who created it, and a survivor of the violence it enabled. Her decision to say yes to the photograph rather than no, as she did in her first life, represents a fundamental strategic pivot. She transforms the curse from a trap into a weapon. The supernatural architecture of the curse, as Iris documented it, is remarkably elegant. The requirement for a witness, a blood descendant of the original wronged party, meant that for 100 years, the Whitmore family had been operating a weapon they did not fully understand. They believed the curse killed randomly or by the victim's own selection. They did not know that its true target could be directed by the witness. Iris Vance, by claiming her inheritance as Eleanor's descendant, did not merely expose the conspiracy. She turned the conspiracy's primary weapon against its creators. The visual manifestation of the curse, the century of crimes written on the Whitmore skin, is a particularly fitting punishment for a family that built its power on invisibility. The Whitmore dynasty survived for 100 years because their crimes were hidden. They fell because a 17-year-old girl made them visible. The trials lasted 18 months. Celeste Whitmore was convicted of 17 counts of conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Harold Whitmore was convicted of 12 counts and received the same sentence. The remaining members of the Board of Trustees were convicted on various charges ranging from conspiracy to obstruction of justice. Melody Whitmore, whose role in the conspiracy was deemed less culpable due to her age, was sentenced to 15 years in a federal penitentiary. The last I heard, she spends her days in the prison library, reading romance novels and writing letters of apology that will never be answered. Nelson was arrested 3 days after the photograph. The system had preserved a recording of his voice from my previous life. I'm sorry, Iris. But Melody was the best of us, and when confronted with the evidence of a crime he had not yet committed, he broke. He confessed to everything. The love letters, the mockery, his plan to push me down the stairs. Because he had not yet committed the murder, he was charged with conspiracy rather than homicide. He received 12 years. He will be 30 when he is released. The remaining 37 members of my graduating class were not criminally charged. They had not yet committed perjury, had not yet covered up a murder, but their complicity in the conspiracy was made public. Their college acceptances were rescinded. Their futures were destroyed. They scattered to community colleges and minimum wage jobs, their names forever associated with the Silverwood massacre. Silverwood Academy was closed by federal order. The building still stands, empty and dark. The curse finally dormant. The graduation photograph, the one I said yes to, was never developed. The film was destroyed. The negatives burned. The photographer paid a generous settlement to forget what he had seen. My parents are alive. They do not remember my death. The timeline has been rewritten, but they know, in some deep and wordless way, that something terrible almost happened. My mother hugs me longer than she used to, and my father tells me he loves me every morning, and the Ivy League acceptance letter that they clutched in their dying hands is now framed on my bedroom wall. I am 18 years old. I am the daughter of a woman who refused to stay dead. And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure that no family ever has to leave a 7-word note because the world decided their daughter didn't matter.